is Shari Boyd. I'm a director at Deloitte Australia, and I'm here today to talk about hydrogen and its role in a decarbonizing world. My presentation, please. Thank you. So hydrogen is versatile. We know that it's currently produced from various energy sources. This includes natural gas and coal, neither of which is considered green, and of course water, which results in green hydrogen. However, we do know that in some cases, when we produce brown hydrogen or green hydrogen, we can use carbon capture and storage technologies to improve the outcomes in relation to its production. Hydrogen also has high energy intensity. This leads to the flexibility in uses for hydrogen. In addition to the flexibility in use cases for hydrogen, hydrogen can also be stored and transported in numerous ways. This leads to some of the strengths in it becoming a major export commodity. Hydrogen can be stored in gaseous, liquid, or solid state. The most suitable storage method will depend on factors such as demand quantities, characteristics, space constraints, and transport needs. Hydrogen can also be transported via a pipeline or any type of vehicle. High compression or liquefaction is typically used when we're looking at transporting hydrogen over distances. Hydrogen, as a clean energy carrier and feedstock, is subject to growing international interest. The growing interest in the hydrogen sector, has really been driven by a few long-term trends. These include the cost of renewables. We're seeing a significant decline in the cost of wind and solar PV generation, and this has opened up the prospect of large-scale production of green hydrogen. This has prompted serious projects and feasibility studies in countries where wind and solar PV can be produced at very low cost. The second major factor trend is industrial decarbonization. There is a fast-growing acknowledgement that energy systems cannot be decarbonized through electrification alone. There is a need for industry and heavy transport and hard-to-abate sectors to examine and assess other decarbonization opportunities. The third trend really relates to gas infrastructure decarbonization. Hydrogen can be transported using existing gas infrastructure with limited adaptation and costs. Although there are some pipeline integrity issues to consider, hydrogen can be blended into existing infrastructure as a transition before potential longer-term conversion is done. This has the potential to enhance hydrogen utilization and also protect gas infrastructure values. And lastly, the fourth trend we're really seeing is the export opportunity presented from hydrogen. There's significant potential relating to the demand of hydrogen as a fuel source for countries such as China, Japan, and South Korea. This government-backed demand growth is driven by decarbonization policies, energy security, and reliability, and presents the opportunity for the development of major export facilities. Next slide, please. So, what are the uses for hydrogen? Well, generally right now, there's 5 main uses that are considered. The first is industrial heat. Currently, hydrogen is not really being used for industrial heat, but it can be used in melting, gasifying, and drying. The price of hydrogen versus incumbent fuels is currently the major impediment for hydrogen being used in relation to industrial heat. The second major use case is pipeline gas. Hydrogen, as mentioned, can be blended with natural gas or can replace natural gas in domestic and industrial uses. In Australia, this is where we are seeing significant movement in hydrogen industry development. There are currently several trials which have received funding from Australia's Renewable Energy Agency to blend hydrogen into gas distribution and transmission networks across Australia. The third major use case is for transportation. Hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles can be used in most transportation use cases, from passenger vehicles to mine vehicles and public transportation. Generally, hydrogen will compare directly with battery electric vehicles, which are generally more widespread, especially in terms of passenger cars, and generally has the necessary infrastructure to charge the vehicles, unlike hydrogen currently, where there is limited refueling infrastructure. However, in some use cases, hydrogen does present some advantages to battery electric vehicles, in particular in relation to long-haul trucking and mine vehicles. This is due to the distance these vehicles travel and the speed of refueling with hydrogen versus recharging. The fourth use case is steel manufacturing. This presents a significant opportunity for decarbonization using hydrogen. There are limited alternatives available to decarbonize steel manufacturing, and so presents a good opportunity for hydrogen. Currently, there are some trials being considered, but hydrogen is not used widely to date in steel manufacturing. And the last use case is chemical feedstock. This relates to the production of ammonia and methanol. Ammonia is mostly used in the manufacturing of fertilizer, and hydrogen is generally already used for these use cases. However, it's not always green hydrogen. And as the industry develops, what we're going to see is more and more use of green hydrogen in relation to chemical feedstocks. Next slide, please. Currently, given the global interest in hydrogen, numerous studies have been undertaken looking at the potential future for the hydrogen globally. These forecasts vary greatly and often depend on the purpose for which these forecasts were completed and how optimistic the party is in relation to hydrogen industry growth. In the end, there's still a lot of unknowns about the exact path that the hydrogen industry will take and how quickly commercialization will happen. But what we do know is that it's probably likely that the hydrogen industry will develop along one of the pathways that we're seeing in terms of these forecasts globally. Next slide, please. One of the important things for hydrogen industry development is having supportive government policies. Recent policy announcements have been made globally and really have been made since early 2018, where a lot of countries were beginning to position themselves into the international hydrogen market. These announcements include introducing a variety of policies aimed at removing barriers to the development and commercialization of hydrogen, as well as incentives aimed to encourage investment growth in the hydrogen industry. These policy initiatives are necessary to really drive the growth in the hydrogen industry. This is especially the case given the current price differential between green hydrogen and the incumbent fuels that they are aimed at replacing. It is within this environment that the Australian government undertook work to develop its national hydrogen strategy. Next slide, please. In addition to the national strategy developed by the federal government in Australia, most of the states and territories in Australia have also passed or adopted their own hydrogen strategies. These strategies are really aimed at taking advantage of the benefits that each state sees as their main strength, either to develop a domestic hydrogen market or to really allow it to position itself to be a significant player in a hydrogen export market. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Overall, I'm optimistic about the role of hydrogen in Australia and globally. I think there's a question about timing, however. In the end, for hydrogen to really take off, it's imperative that it becomes price competitive with the incumbent fuels it will compete against. There are several things from my perspective that will help hydrogen projects being developed. To me, the key factors are, first, collaboration will be key to success. This is between regulators, policymakers, and cross-industry players. It will be imperative to secure offtake in order for the project to proceed. Financing a project without firm offtake agreements is going to be difficult. It will be important to create domestic partnerships, securing offtake to enable project de-risking. We also need to consider the changing consumer and investor behavior. Investors and customers will continue to drive the shift away from carbon, and that requires a different approach to investment decision making. It will be important in the early stages of hydrogen development that hydrogen production is available for multiple end uses. Companies need to be able to leverage their existing advantages, including trade relationships, export infrastructure, and distribution. And it will be critical for a clear strategy to be in place. This includes looking at decarbonization opportunities and new business opportunities for incumbent businesses. Those are some of my general thoughts on the role that hydrogen will have in decarbonizing our future. Thank you very much for your time.